Good afternoon. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. This is Monday, December 27th, and we welcome you to our weekly update from Westchester County. We'll be talking quite a bit about the COVID pandemic outbreak. I'm joined by Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins. In the spirit of the great increase in infections based on COVID, Ken and I will be separated, each be at the podium at separate periods of time. And although we'll be speaking unmasked, we'll be masking up when we're not speaking to give you the information and the update. Let me start off, first of all, by wishing all who celebrated a very Merry Christmas. We're 2 days after Christmas, and hopefully the spirit of the holiday is still with us and something that we can hang on to during these difficult times. We want to extend to all of our African-American brothers and sisters who are in the middle of a 7-day celebration of Kwanzaa, that they have a very joyous period of time, a contemplative time, to look at all the different principles that follow Kwanzaa, this being the second day of Kwanzaa, and that we're all getting ready for a very happy New Year ahead. New Year 2022 is what is at hand, and I think most of us have felt that 2020 and 2021, because of the COVID impacts, have been a very negative thing. So we look to the new year with optimism, with a belief that the new year will be better than the old year, and that we will find our way through this together. Let me also just personally thank all of those who have written me over the course of the prior 2 weeks to wish me well. 2 weeks ago today, I had a test that confirmed that I had contracted COVID, apparently of the Omicron variant. In terms of my symptoms, they were very light. Never got a fever, never had any trouble breathing, had some of the symbolisms of a cold, but it was very light. I was asymptomatic prior to it. So from my standpoint, though so many people reached out, wished me well, Ken also will address it when he gets up to the microphone. He too went through a positive designation. Many of us now in this society have been affected because the infection is really widespread. And so we'll get to the numbers and look at what exactly we're watching, which is an historic amount of positive cases of COVID. As of yesterday, the state tracker showed that in Westchester County, we have 16,819 active cases of coronavirus in Westchester County. That are people that have tested positive and have not gone through the 10-day, 2-week period to be relieved of their COVID protocol. 16,819. Our prior peak came right at the initial stage of the infection when we broke 12,000 active cases. That number went down. Last year during the holiday season, we perked back up, and in January of 2021, right after the end of the New Year's period, we got back as high as 11,500 cases and then receded down to less than 200 at the end of June. But the numbers have been spiking, and it's been a dramatic spike. Go back 1 month ago, right around the Thanksgiving timeframe, on November 26th, 1 month ago, we had 2,078 active cases. Just a week ago, on the 19th of December, we had 7,462 active cases, and in the space of 7 days, we've gone from 7,400 active cases to 16,819 positive tests for COVID. That is a frighteningly high jump in the number of people that have gotten the disease. To put into perspective, based on infection percentages, a month ago, the infection rate of everybody tested was 2%. 2% of all the people that tested for COVID in late November were tested positive for COVID. In yesterday's numbers, 13.7% of the people that were tested for COVID came up positive. And keep in mind that the testing numbers that we report are the ones that go through the New York State system of registration. Generally, they're PCR tests, and they're categorized and quantified so we can give you an idea. It does not count all of the in-home tests that people have taken that have either rendered a positive or a negative test. And then again, there's a large number of people that haven't been tested at all that may have the COVID disease, the variant. So we're looking at fractions that have been exploding in front of us in a society where the disease might be more widespread even than we guess. But the number of active cases at 16,819, an infection rate of 13.7% is news. It is large front page news. What's also important to understand, and we talk about this when we go down the line, the checkoff, is the severity of the disease. Now, my symptoms were very light, and that's what you've heard from many people that have recently tested positive for COVID under Omicron. But we still look at the next test of severity is how many people are hospitalized. On November 24th, we had 50 people in Westchester County hospitalized for COVID. November 24th, 50 people. As of December 24th, 214 people have been hospitalized for COVID. That is an increase of fourfold in the space of a month. People, not just with the disease, but hospitalized for the disease. That number is concerning. The peak hospitalization that we've ever had during this was 600 people, again, during the front end of the outbreak. Now, there were no vaccinations at the front end of the outbreak. Most of us, many of us who've gotten the disease have been double vaxxed, some double vaxxed with a booster shot, and still contracted the disease. What we do seem to see is that those people that have been vaccinated properly, either at the 2 level or the booster level, still may get the disease, but do not suffer seriously, do not wind up being hospitalized because of the disease. And so to that extent, we're somewhat comforted by the overall case. But to go up from 50 hospitalizations to 214, that number has been rising each day this week. That is a great concern to us. The next level of concern is fatalities. Now, there are people who posit that so many more people have gotten the disease, but it hasn't affected people as seriously. We've just given you the hospitalization numbers. Let me give you the fatality numbers. In the month prior to Thanksgiving, 7 people lost their life in Westchester County due to COVID. In the month from Thanksgiving to Christmas, 30 people have died. That, too, is a fourfold increase in the number of fatalities. So we've had a fourfold increase in hospitalizations and a fourfold increase in the number of fatalities. We have had a multiple of 8 in terms of the number of people affected. So you might say, well, that's twice as many more people that get the disease as suffer hospitalization or fatality. And we believe that that factor difference is the number of people that have been vaccinated versus an unvaccinated population. In Westchester County now, our vaccination rates, a single vaccination, over 94%, double vaccinated, over 84%. We don't have numbers on the booster shot. We don't have full and complete numbers on pediatric vaccinations as well. But all of those numbers have been rising. Ken, in a few minutes, will mention some of the satellite locations that we have coming up and what we'll be doing for both vaccination and testing. But we cannot deny that in the last few weeks, the COVID impact have been much greater, with a tremendous increase in number of cases and an increase in the number of hospitalizations and the number of fatalities. Now, I don't present these numbers as a Cassandra, as a person who is saying that the sky is falling. It is to show the importance of us taking the actions that are within our control to try to reduce our likelihood of getting the disease or getting it more seriously. Just about 3 weeks ago, I declared a state of emergency in Westchester County. It followed similar declarations in Erie County and Ulster County, but it preceded many of other neighboring counties that in fact made a point of saying, well, why are they declaring an emergency? It's premature. I think what's proved to be now is that it was not premature, it was prescient. That we saw what was coming, and that what was coming was what came was even worse than what we thought might come. And so by creating a state of emergency and raising the bar in being prepared for it, we had a number of positive actions that we think reduced the even greater likelihood that we would have had more of this disease amongst us. We increased the amount of vaccination satellites dramatically during the month of December, using our responsibilities in county government. We changed the testing model, which we'll talk about in a second, and tested many more people in the month of December than we had previously. We saw that by our calling for a state of emergency without mandates, we wound up with many organizations, got a long list of them: Grandpa's United, White Plains Rotary, the Rivertowns Chamber of Commerce, the Larchmont Chamber of Commerce, the Sister to Sister International Kwanzaa event held primarily Yonkers attendees, all of which shifted from what would have been in-person meetings to Zoom meetings, knowing that they were seeing an increase in the amount of infections. We had a number of events that were scheduled for this month that have been postponed to January, and in some cases to February, until we see a diminution. It doesn't mean we're not going to have those events. It doesn't mean we're not going to have interaction. We're just going to wait to see when the disease is in some sort of moment of recession, and we see a lesser number of infections, that we can do some of those in-person situations. We have seen that there's been a much greater use of masks in indoor settings. The governor put a mask mandate out there. We had a number of counties around and say we're not going to enforce it. What we said very simply is we're going to implement it. Enforcement, which is always viewed as a punitive action, penalties and so forth, is the last step of implementation. But what we did do in the period of time since this emergency declaration was made here in Westchester County and the governor made her mandate is we've been able to get out masks and distribute them through local chambers of commerce to many of the small businesses in Westchester County. When I was out during the holiday season in some of the major department stores, everyone was wearing a mask. And in some of the smaller stores, that's not easy to do. So we tried to make it available to them. I want to thank Sherry Rosen-Asher and her efforts to work with our local chambers of commerce to get those masks out. And we also got them out in other settings for certain churches and certain other not-for-profit organizations to try to get greater compliance, not because a mask prevents you from getting COVID, it reduces the likelihood that you'll get COVID. Less people that get the disease, less people that get sick from the disease, less people wind up hospitalized, less people wind up suffering fatalities. But we went through all of these things and we saw a few weeks ago what the potential was, and that potential has been exceeded by the actual numbers on the ground. I want to highlight as well that as we go through all of this, we've also seen a tremendous demand for increase in testing. And the testing has been mandated in part because more of us have been exposed to people that have had COVID. It also has been exacerbated by the number of people that want to travel at the holiday season. They want to be with loved ones. They want to know that they don't have the disease. They're not bringing the disease into a family setting with grandma, grandpa, or anybody that's vulnerable at any age level of these things. Just to give you a parameter of testing, what is tracked in the New York State system, those are generally the PCR tests that are given out at satellite locations, at our health clinics, at the Westchester Medical Center, wherever those various tests have been administered. If we go back to the past 2 weeks, we have had 180,000 individual tests conducted. The 2 weeks prior to that, we had 128,000 tests conducted. That's a 40% increase from 2 weeks ago to the last week. 40% increase from 128,000 tests to 180,000 tests. If you go back to the 2-week cohort before that, which takes us back to a month ago, we had 105,000 tests. So from 105,000 tests in a 2-week period, to 128,000 tests in a 2-week period, to 180,000 2-week period, we have ramped up testing in a significant fashion over this period of time. And that does not count the amount of in-home tests where people will get a kit, test themselves, and a rapid test and know whether or not they're positive or negative. Those numbers don't get into the system, and there's probably any number of more tests along those lines that have happened. But what we are watching is a nationwide explosion in the incidence of positive cases, as well as a nationwide explosion in the number of demand for testing. And no matter what system you're looking at, the demand has far exceeded the supply of tests nationwide. I know the lines that I've seen in Westchester County, people have called me about it, look at this, look at that, and clearly that's been the case. But I turn on television, as you might, and I see lines in New Jersey, lines in Long Island, lines in Manhattan. They say, well, New York City's giving out free tests. Yes, and the lines are 4 times the length of tests available for them as they have been in other cases. That is why we made the decision as late as last Wednesday, just sitting on top of the holiday. We were given approximately 40,000 test kits from New York State, and we determined that rather than wait to disseminate them after Christmas, which would have been easier logistically to do, that we were going to disseminate them right away. And so in the space of almost no time at all, from a Wednesday afternoon standing start, we were able to get some of those cases out to over 65 fire and EMS departments, to 42 police departments, to our various federally qualified health centers, and to various hospitals. Those were test kits made available to increase the amount of testing available through health centers, which serve the indigent, through hospitals, through our police and our EMS individuals, and particularly to help those individuals continue to function to do their job, so that police and fire and EMS officials, when they go out and they interact with people, they could then test to find out if they had contracted COVID while they were doing their jobs. Very important to keep those people on the job. What we also did was take a bulk of those 40,000 tests and make them available to the 45 municipalities of Westchester County. We knew that they would not satisfy the demand, but we also knew that giving the option for the local village, the local town, and the local city to disseminate them, they would be able to identify, based on their local priorities, what the best way of distribution would be. And those communities interacted with their residents in different ways. I'm a resident of the city of Rye, and I saw a mass email that went out that talked about how Rye City was going to disseminate it. I saw online things that came out from the town of Bedford and other villages and towns that outlined this. But in every case, providing 40,000 test kits snapped up like that, and it did not satisfy the demand. And for those people that wanted the test kit that couldn't get it, there's a certain frustration. There's a frustration when you get online at an urgent care center, of which there are many that can distribute this. And the urgent care centers were not structured to be able to handle this kind of mass demand. And I think we have to understand and realize the moment that we're in. There's a tremendous demand to be tested. People want to know whether they have this or not. It's perfectly understandable. And what happened was, over the course of the prior few months, there was a very low level of testing demand, and so the state pulled out of the drive-through testing locations and the central testing locations, and they left the urgent care and the home health kits to be the basic mechanism by which you test. And in the space of less than a month, less than 3 weeks, the demand has shot through the roof, and that has happened nationwide, as evidenced by the lines everywhere. Our response last week was to take the 40,000 kits, which we gratefully appreciate were given to us by the state of New York, and within real time turn them back around and get them out into the hands of people that needed them. The 40,000 individuals that benefited from having those kits were benefited from it. When you consider that those aren't the only kits that were out there, that 40,000 plus the other kits that are out there, plus 180,000 people tested in the last 2 weeks, and if you add the numbers up over the last 6 weeks, you get 400,000 individuals. Now, many of them might have been tested more than once over the course of these 4 weeks, but you're approaching half of the population of Westchester County for which there was sufficient testing. But not sufficient testing for everybody who wanted it, and that's why the long lines. Now, I will say that I saw comments on Facebook. I'm sure there'll be some after this video is done, and I heard comments from other people that were less than kind, that were angry that there weren't more tests available. We use the tests that were available to us. We don't generate them at the county level of government. We receive them from the state, and we put them out there in the field as fast as we could. We did not dictate to the municipalities how they were to disseminate them. Every community might have done a little bit of a different nuance, and we were not the repository of all the information of how every single village and town were going to do those distributions. That was the province of those communities, and they went ahead to do their dead level best. We specifically want to pick up these tests from the state. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been delivered to us until today, after Christmas. We went out and picked them up early. We made a point of making them available to the municipalities so they could pick them up. And all of those things, we think, was the intelligent way to approach this. I want to publicly thank our Commissioner of the Department of Emergency Services, Richard Wishney. I want to publicly thank Deputy Commissioner Susan Spear and all of the men and women of that department that did yeoman work from midday on Wednesday throughout Thursday, throughout Friday, to be able to make sure that these kits were available to those individuals so that some percentage of people could have them, be tested, and know whether they had it or not, and feel some sense of comfort if they came up negative, and at least were able to interact because of the positive. If it were not for Commissioner Wishney, Deputy Commissioner Spear, and their teams, we would not have had this positive result. And I want to thank those local governments that responded with almost no time left on the clock. Most of the time, local governments, as businesses, sort of wind down just before a major holiday, and in this particular case, we asked people to wind up and do a major task of distribution, and they did it well, and they did it with a mission to try to help people and satisfy as much of the need that could be satisfied, and we're appreciative of that. Now, going forward, we recognize that this demand for testing is going to require additional places to test. The local urgent care facilities who do a fine job of testing were never meant to have mass testing available. That's why you see long lines out in front of them down and around the block. The weather has turned cold. People are agitated. They're worried about whether they have the disease or not. They're standing on line. It's a bad scene altogether. We have offered to the state of New York the willingness to use Glen Island as a place for drive-through testing. The state may choose to use a state-owned facility for that purpose, and there's been some dialogue about the FDR Park up in Yorktown, which is a state-owned park, which may in fact be used for drive-through testing. New York State hasn't made any firm announcements about it. We support any location that the state can partner with us and a healthcare entity to provide drive-through testing. At the same time, we are now partnering with Quadrant Biosciences to offer free PCR COVID testing at the Westchester County Center. That's going to start on Wednesday. This is Monday as we're having this conversation. It's going to start on Wednesday. I encourage you to go to our website, westchestergov.com, for some of the details. We have a limited number of tests, and I tell you that up front. The demand for testing will exceed the amount of tests we have available, but the tests that we're given, we will give them to everybody that we can, up to the satisfaction of the amount that we have available. There will be limited times, but you must make an appointment. We will not handle walk-up individuals. We know you want it badly, so does the rest of the world. We have to work on an appointment system. We operated the county center very effectively previously using this system. We will have county police and other personnel there to help direct you. Using the county center allows people to come into the facility outside of the cold. And however we handle the arrangements for logistically accommodating people, it should be a more convenient way than standing, on a long line in a street corner waiting to get into an urgent care center. The testing is going to be targeted for those that are experiencing symptoms of COVID, anyone who's been exposed to someone who is tested positive for COVID-19. The testing is not meant to make it easy for you to travel. Right now, we have hierarchy of need, and if a person is showing symptoms of COVID and may have to isolate or get extra treatment, we want to make sure those individuals can be sure of what their status is. The testing is for all ages, including infants. We are not limited by age in the testing that we're doing. Go to westchestergov/health to get more information on this. We are identifying the days for which testing will be available. 2 days this week, the 29th and the 30th, and then starting next Monday, 5 days, work days a week, but there are different times of each day in which they'll be available at Westchester County Center. Parking is available for free at that location, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to satisfy some additional amount of the demand that exists. But again, we recognize the demand is greater than we have a supply for. This is a much larger national issue about supply for testing kits. In this particular case, the county center, it's PCR testing, which is a higher level of surety. But for any level of testing, there's still limits to what we have, and individuals are going to have to respond within the parameters necessary in order to get access to the testing. Forgive my cough. I don't believe this is tied into my COVID. You may know that I have a sort of a seasonal cough this time of the year. Go back and look at the videos from a year ago when I was coughing right around this time again. The county has received a number of KN95 masks from New York State, and we are going to be disseminating them, that limited number, to various municipalities. Once again, we're going to go through the local governments to make them available, and they will be able to disseminate them after Wednesday, this Wednesday the 29th, between 9 to 2. We're going to make those available to the municipal governments. There is no action step for you to take as a member of the public right now. The local government in the community that you live in will make some sort of an announcement in whatever mechanism they use to reach the residents of the community to make those KN95 masks available. Now, those are the masks that I'm told are the most effective masks to wear. They're more effective than the surgical mask, which I'm wearing now. These are more effective than the cloth masks. I think it's pretty clear that the breakthrough cases that we've seen, you can be masked and still potentially get COVID. But these masks reduce the amount of it. The cough that I just gave with nobody in 6 foot is not in jeopardy. But the reality is that we're not always in 6 foot distance from people around us. And I understand the debate in the society over mask wearing. We have the vast majority of Westchester residents that understand why we wear masks. We don't wear them as a political statement. We do not wear them because we like to wear them. I don't like wearing the mask any more than anybody else does. It restricts my ability to communicate, which is why I take it off when I'm speaking in a public context. I have a little loss of hearing, so when somebody else is talking to me with a mask, I have to lean in. It's uncomfortable to to be sure I can understand what they're saying. But these are the small sacrifices that we're making to try to deal with this disease. I'll close my comments at the end of this a little more thoroughly. But the bottom line is we intend to get through this disease. We intend to have a positive result in 2022. But that positive result doesn't come from wishful thinking. It comes from prudent action. And so to the extent that we have KN95 masks to disseminate, we're going to be doing that as part of our county outreach. Now, the county outreach also involves our continuing series of vaccination satellites. Some of them call them pop-ups. We think that's too casual. We call them satellites. Ken Jenkins, our deputy county executive, is going to share with you what's happening there, and as well how we're handling this issue within our correctional institution. Deputy County Executive Ken Jenkins.
Thanks, George. Certainly, we are going to continue the vaccination satellites because, as County Executive pointed out, and all of us know, and the experts continue to say, that vaccinations plus masking is the best way for all of us to get through this situation. The next one that is coming up is tomorrow, which is for second doses only in Eastchester at the Cottle School. So it's second doses, and it's from 3:30 to 7 p.m. So the folks that have gotten their first shot in Eastchester, tomorrow will be the day for that vaccination satellite in Eastchester. It was really targeting our younger folks, but that is available for everyone on the second doses on Eastchester tomorrow. There'll be a whole set of additional locations, satellite locations, that you'll be able to see on the county website. For next week, we're working with many municipalities to continue this. Again, vaccinations plus boosters when you're eligible for a booster are the best way to protect yourself, to make sure that should you incur the disease and get infected, that you'll be able to have mild to no symptoms. The county jail and our county correctional facility in Valhalla, after consultation with the Department of Health, the State Commission on Correction, and out of abundance of caution, will cease family visitation at the county jail starting tomorrow, December 28th. So December 28th, the visitation at the correctional facility will be halted. That happened last year when we had our first increase of the disease and the infection of COVID. We protected those individuals that are there and the staff members that work in and around the correctional facility. If you have a correctional communication need, please connect with the Department of Correction. They will give you all of the appropriate information to ensure that you'll be able to communicate with those folks that you need to, that are residents in the correctional facility. We are in a time of the year that COVID is just not the only thing. It is winter, and for us in the winter, that means that we are in the Northeast, and we are expecting today a wintry mix. Now, there should be light on accumulation according to all of the weather forecasts. However, the weather's going to go down, the temperature's going to go down, and on our roads, that's going to create icy surfaces, and that means that people should take extra time and caution this evening. Please be careful as you're traveling this evening. A lot of people are still coming back from their Christmas holidays, where they were celebrating or away when they're not celebrating, and coming home this evening. So please be careful as we go through a wintry mix of a storm. Finally, I want to make sure to take the time, as County Executive did, to thank all of those individuals that had called or emailed or sent text messages, social media, et cetera, and wishing good speed through the particular process. After having received the COVID positive test, for me, it was on the 16th of December that I tested positive, but double vaccinated and boosted in October, so it wasn't something that was recent as far as the boosting was concerned in my particular case, but my symptoms were extremely mild. Again, a cough, some chills, some body aches. I didn't actually get a fever, but at the end of the day, all those folks, the professionals, the health department, and all the staff that helped us navigate through that. I want to congratulate my middle guy, Jamal, because he was able to successfully navigate in our house. Everyone else Eventually had positive. My wife and one of my other sons was positive. My wife was boosted just as well. My youngest son had the one shot Johnson & Johnson, but he did not get his booster yet. He is eligible, by the way, since he was asymptomatic going through this particular process. As soon as he gets through, and he cleared on the 26th, that he can go out and get a booster. So again, just being infected, if you were asymptomatic, you are eligible for a booster according to the CDC. And we want to make sure that everyone continues to do everything possible, including now KN95 masks, to boost up when you're eligible to do that. Again, we'll be able to get through this, navigating through this particular COVID crisis with Omicron right now, which is extremely transmissible. A lot of breakthrough cases. There's so many people that we've seen around the country and around the world that are double vaccinated and boosted and still contracting this disease. It's one of those things that's in the air, and we're just going to have to work through it. But we can navigate it together if we use all the tools available to us, including vaccinations, boosters when you're eligible, and masking up. Thanks, George.
Thanks very much, Ken. And I think the fact that both Ken and I, a number of other elected officials, and certainly plenty of people in our world also contracted this disease at some point in time helps us understand a little bit of the concern and the fear that we all have thinking about it. Both Ken and I have gone now 22 months in our respective responsibilities for the county government. We went through a period of time when we had almost all of the rest of our staff working remotely at home to protect them from contracting the disease. And he and I and a couple of other executives, Joan McDonald, Catherine Chaffee, were in here every day on the 9th floor of the county office building, basically 5, 6, 7 of us running what normally takes 30 people to do it. And I guess at some point in time, you begin to think, well, it's not going to happen to me because I've gone this long without it. But it did. It happened to me, it happened to him, and it happened to other people, and it can happen to you if you manage to avoid it to this point in time. So I think we go back to the reality that vaccinations represent the best possible protection. I think we both believe that the mildness of our infection was aided by the fact that we had been vaccinated previously, and we had antibodies built up that could deal with this disease in a much more critical fashion. The fact that there are still 214 people right now in Westchester County hospitalized, and that is 160 some odd more than was a month ago, should tell us that the mild symptoms for some of us does not mean that it will be a mild symptom for all of us, and that the vaccination tool is necessary. I understand many people don't believe that. They believe other things. I'm not here to lecture you. I'm here, however, to say what is obvious to at least 94% of the people of Westchester County, that vaccinations are an important tool to deal with this. If you're serious about dealing with this disease, then vaccinations are important, and that's why we're making sure that we've got booster shots and satellite locations that Ken has just highlighted. It's an important tool to use to try to get us through this as best as we can. We'll take some questions from the press in just a couple of seconds. I do want to highlight that a week from today, we will be right here in our county office building, and we will have a virtual inauguration ceremony, which will begin my second term as county executive, and by extension, Ken Jenkins's second term as deputy county executive. Legally, at the stroke of midnight, January 1st, I begin my second term. The first time, we had a wonderful inauguration, a large event over at the Community College Auditorium with almost 1,000 people present. And as you can imagine, it's like everything in life that's important to us. If you have a graduation ceremony, if you have a child bar mitzvah or first communion, you want to have family and friends in a very great celebratory situation. However, those sacrifices have been made within the society. High school graduations have been diminished. College graduations have been diminished. People have put off wedding plans, have restructured the size and scope of wedding plans. All wonderful events that we look forward to in life because of making the concessions to this disease. So one of the things that we do is exactly what we encourage other organizations to do. We have taken what would have been an in-person, large-scale event, and we've turned it into a virtual event. So exactly at the same time that we normally have our update, next Monday, January 3rd at 2 o'clock, we will have our virtual inauguration ceremony. We will have prominent members of the judiciary swearing us both in. Ken will make remarks. I will make remarks as well at that time. We'll expect to have some greetings from some prominent statewide elected officials who will be here on video, not in the room. And certainly our friends in the press do not have to be in the room to pick up the feed if they find any of that stuff newsworthy. And you're welcome to tune into that ceremony. That will be again on Monday, January 3rd at 2 p.m. Same venue here as we have each time, and this will be an understanding of what we have to do for COVID. Now, the election that was held back in November elected town and village and city officers all across the county. In your local community, check the local website for your local government to determine what type of inaugural event will occur. Some of them will occur at the regularly scheduled meeting of the board. Newcastle's town board inauguration will be at the first meeting of the Newcastle Town Council. The same will be true in Greenburgh, the town board there. Cortland Town will have an inaugural ceremony on Sunday, January 2nd, but that will be virtual. Some may still determine to do it in person, but if you want to see the local officials that you voted for take on their next term of office, you'll be able to do that. Consult your local websites, governmental websites, and they'll give you the details. Many of the villages already were in office. The village rules are a little bit different. They came into office at the 1st of December. So we're looking now at those cities and those towns that had November elections and now inaugural as we all begin our new term that starts in the year 2022. So let me take a look, see if there are any questions from our press friends. Catherine Chaffee, our Director of Communications, is here. Catherine, any questions?
Yes, we have a bunch of questions. The first one is from David Proper from the Journal News. He asks, what advice do you have for people who want to gather and attend parties for New Year's Eve? Do you think they should stay home?
Well, it's not for me to tell folks to stay home on New Year's Eve. I think the first most important reality is to know if you're going beyond your nuclear family that you live with, and Ken just went through the realities of having children in a nuclear family and who may or may not be exposed to it, whether it's wise or not to do that, you have to make that decision on your own. I think the larger, the more open-ended the party is, the more chances there is for infections to be shared. And I think the fact that there are breakthrough infections, even people that are vaccinated, boosted, have gotten it. And so I don't think you can automatically assume that because you've been vaccinated, you won't get it. So you should consider your plans. Perhaps as joyous as New Year's Eve is to start a new year, you may want to wait a month until the Lunar New Year, the Asian New Year, is celebrated in the first part of February. See where we are with the virus at that stage of the game, and we may have just as celebratory an event in early February as in early January. But if you do it, it's pretty obvious. It's hard to have New Year's Eve and social distance. It's hard to have New Year's Eve and everybody wears a mask and communicates that way. And of course, the one thing that we can't do is prioritize people getting testing to see if they have the disease or not have the disease because they're going to a party. It's more important for us to try to help the people that are vulnerable, people who may be exposed to the disease with underlying health concerns, and try to prioritize the testing for those individuals since there are a limited number of testing. So I guess my advice is use your noodle and determine if it's something that you can postpone. You can have that celebratory event anytime you want. If your friends are your friends, they'll be there. And if it's not on New Year's Eve, then you'll find an appropriate other event for it to be at. But these are individual decisions that are being made by individuals, and this is the test of American individualism. We pride ourselves on our independence. We pride ourselves in our freedom, but you have to use your freedom intelligently.
The next question comes from News 12. They ask, with the rise in COVID cases, is the county willing to mandate anything similar to what New York City has done in the new year? And what about test to stay?
Well, we're supportive of test to stay. We have already been working with school districts to allow test for stay, working through our county health department. Test to stay basically says that children do not have to be automatically quarantined if they're exposed to a classmate who comes down with COVID if they test and they test negative. If they test negative, then they can stay in classroom. I think we all understand that we want kids to be in classroom. That is the place for them to get their best possible learning experience. But obviously, once you test, if you test positive, then you have to go through the protocols and you have to exempt yourself from being in a contact with other people. So we're supportive of test to stay, and we have our next meeting next Monday morning, Jan 3rd, with all of the school superintendents over Zoom, and we'll have a discussion about how we can help them implement that. In terms of mandates similar to New York City, there's going to be a change in the New York City administration come New Year's Day. We don't know what Mayor-elect Adams will do to continue or discontinue the policies of Mayor de Blasio. I think we want to see what happens. They've just imposed a new mandate on all private businesses requiring vaccinations. I would tell you this. I know the demand is out there in part of the electorate for us to create mandates. And people who have, quote unquote, done the right thing, have vaccinated themselves, want to be in settings only with other people that are vaccinated. They don't want to be exposed to unvaccinated people. That is how they prefer. And they look at the New York City restaurant as an example policy of that. The purpose of that vaccination mandate was not to make you feel more comfortable when you go out to dine. The purpose was to encourage more people to be vaccinated. New York City's vaccination rate was well below Westchester when they imposed that mandate, and even today, our vaccination numbers exceed the vaccination numbers of Bronx, of Brooklyn, of Staten Island, where we have not had a mandate, but we have pushed vaccinations in every way short of the mandate. The desire that people have to say, I want to feel safe when I go out, you have to countenance that right now there is no absolute feeling of safety. You are taking, as I do, you're taking a certain amount of risk. And if that risk means that you don't feel comfortable being in this setting, but you do feel comfortable being in that setting, then you have to make those assessments. I make those assessments every day. And, apparently there was one event that I went to that I wound up contracting the disease because of that particular event. And when I consider all the events that I've been to, it's a rather small percentage of the total. But I also have to tell you that for folks who call for mandates, they themselves are not in the business of having to implement those mandates. They have no idea how strong the resistance is, no matter how small a cohort of people it is, to deal with those mandates. And to implement the mandate, to enforce those mandates, takes a physical presence at various times, a confrontational presence at various times. This society is so bitterly divided already on ideology, and those divisions have been worked over in the political process. I've tried not to add to those divisions, although I defend the point of view that I hold on various issues, and sometimes that represents a pushback, and therefore it appears to be divisive. But I think it must be understood that when you have a county that is 90-some-odd% vaccinated, we don't need a vaccination mandate. We need to try to make it possible now for everybody who's double vaxxed to get boosted. We need for the kids that did not have access to a vaccination previously, a pediatric vaccination, to get access to that. We need to make testing happen so that people have a greater sense of comfort. Those are the priorities of the government as we go forward. To help the governor's mask mandate, we have been trying to make masks more easily available in business settings, indoor settings. We have a mask mandate in this building where all the people who come into this building are either coming in to interact with county government or work for county government. But to do what New York City has done is a different level of challenge. When we announced the state of emergency, I said at the time very clearly, this is the opportunity for you, the individual, to show you're going to use your individual judgment before government has to override that judgment. This is your opportunity to show what you can do to protect yourself best against the against the disease, and vaccination being the single biggest tool. And we've seen quite a good response in Westchester County to that call for emergency services.
The next question, which is also the last question, is from Martin Wilbur from the Examiner. He asks, does the county have numbers on how many of those currently hospitalized, and how many of the fatalities within the past month were not vaccinated?
We will try to get those numbers. Just before we went on for the airtime, I tried to have those numbers for this update. We did not get them in real time. The last time we looked at these numbers, they were running about 2 to 1 people who are unvaccinated to those vaccinated. And then, of course, the vaccination number has to be broken down. Were they vaxxed once or twice or 3 times? Do they have underlying diseases? And those are mitigating factors so that it's not just that they were vaccinated, that there are other factors as well. For Martin's purposes and the Examiner News, any of the other members of the press, we'll try to have those statistics if we can get them. A little tough to get them today. We'll try to get them the next day or so that we can provide you those percentages. We believe, as we're told nationwide, that those who've become particularly ill and those who have died are either in one of two situations. Number one, they have an underlying health situation that is very severe, for which vaccination alone is not sufficient protection. Or number two, they are unvaccinated, and they have left themselves open to the disease, and now, because of other factors, they are suffering. We don't want anyone to die, regardless of their vaccination status. We don't judge people morally, rightly, or wrongly. If you haven't done this, then somehow you're morally wrong. We don't look at it that way. It's a matter of practicality. The practicality is if you are unvaccinated and you become vaccinated, you reduce the likelihood of serious illness or death. There's no guarantees in life. You can drive safely, leave this building, drive home, and under the wrong set of circumstances, maybe those icy roads that Ken talked about coming later tonight, you might lose your life tonight. But that doesn't mean you go out recklessly, drive faster than you should, have alcohol at the wheel, text at the wheel, and do things that make the likelihood of you having a disaster greater. And so for our purposes, at this stage of the game, we hope that we'll get those statistics for you. We hope that we'll have less statistics to have to show you, but what we have been seeing is an increase in those numbers, and I suspect they will show that the larger percentage of them are people that are unvaccinated. But we'll see what the numbers show and prove it. Let me just close out today's update. Next week, as I said, there'll be an inauguration, and then we'll probably have an update the next day after that to talk about numbers. I am by nature a confident person, and I'm by nature an optimistic person. And I continue to believe from the very first day of this pandemic to this point, we will get through this. There is a getting through of COVID. I believe it's going to happen in 2022. I think we've now seen a full year's worth of living with it. We've had a full year's worth of vaccinations and other tools that have been made available to us that we did not have in the first year of this. Of every 3 people that we lost to fatality, 2 of them we lost before vaccinations came on the scene. I shared that statistic on Facebook, I think that's an important statistic to look at. The people who are anti-vaccinations have alternate narratives. That's fine. It's a free country. You can advocate whatever you want. But I've seen an overwhelming response from the medical community, the scientific community, the people that I rely on when I go in for a checkup. They check my heart. They check whether I have any incidence of cancer. I trust their judgment. These are people who are also telling me to trust the vaccine and trust the scientific responses. And so I do trust those responses, and I take that at face value. We will get through this, and we will get through this, and we will return to the kind of lifestyle that we want to have, that we prioritize here in this country, in this county, and elsewhere. But we will not do it with fantasy. We will not do it with ideology. And if that rubs somebody the wrong way, I'm sorry. It's what I believe. Arguing an ideological point of view is not the proper protection against a protein virus that does not have the thinking capacity to talk to you, and you can talk them out of what the work they're there to do. We have the opportunity, if we show proper discipline, if we show proper perseverance, to get through this. We can have our kids in class and get the proper learning. We can continue to function without shutting down the government, without shutting down the business community, which has happened. We have industries that have been badly affected by this, not because government made a decision to do something, but because consumers have made a decision not to interact. I point to the hospitality industry and the travel and tourism industry. They have suffered greatly, not because government shut them down, but because individuals lost confidence in being able to travel at the same level that they did before. So our strategy is not just to tell you what to do, it is to create a climate by which you feel comfortable doing those things. And while there are people of one philosophy that want to be free to do whatever they want at their time, that philosophy is not shared by everybody. You will not have a full economic recovery until people that are reticent to interact with the economy feel equally comfortable being out in that environment. And they will not feel that way until they see the numbers drop, until they see a reduction in the amount of infections, which is why we have to try to take the strategies that will reduce the infections, reduce the hospitalizations, reduce the fatalities. I had a 20-year experience in business. I worked for major corporations. Ken had a similar experience in a different type of responsibility. And what I learned in those things is that there were not ideological ways to solve problems inside a business. We talked through practical ways to solve the problem. We did not let some predetermined philosophy dictate how we were going to solve a particular business problem at that time. And I think sometimes in government, we have that predisposed situation. It ties into our politics. It ties into a host of different things. I'm told there's a new movie out called Don't Look Up. I haven't seen it yet. It has to do with a future world catastrophic event and how the population, how the public officials, politicians, if you will, how the media respond to a crisis in which you can't get to consensus. It's really up to us to determine how we want to respond to this crisis in the 22nd month of its presence amongst us. And I'm still confident that we're going to get through this. As this year comes to an end, as we get ready for a new year, I believe we're going to get through this. But again, I think it's the same thing we've talked about before, and I'll repeat them again: thoughtfulness, self-discipline, perseverance. Those are the most important tools that we have. If we're thoughtful about the way we behave, if we show self-discipline, things we want to do, that we restrain from doing, because that puts us in less jeopardy. And if we show perseverance, that every morning we wake up, it looks a lot like the day before, like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day. It looks like the day before, but we show perseverance day after day after day, we'll get through this. I believe we will, and I look forward to the day when we can say this is officially behind us. But as of today, we're working through an increase in the virus, and we're going to work through as productively as we can. I'm George Latimer, Westchester County Executive. Thank you for watching. We wish you a very happy Kwanzaa, joyous Kwanzaa week, and then also a very happy New Year celebration, whatever you decide to do. And hopefully we'll see you a week from today for the official second inauguration of our term here in the county office building in Westchester County. Thank you. Have a good day.